Hi everyone, good evening and welcome to Exhale Online with Pravi. Uh, I want to tender due apologies. I've been offline for a couple of days now. Basically, we've missed, I think, 3 broadcasts, 2 Wednesdays and a Sunday, and it was due to health reasons beyond my control. And the good thing is that I am back and I'm back for you. So by the grace of God, we've been talking about breaking the pattern, and we are halfway through the month of July, and it's been an amazing run so far. So I want to take this opportunity to thank all those who reached out to me privately, and those who took out time to call to know how things were going on with me during this period that I was not feeling too good. But that's how you know that you are loved and valued by so many people. There are quite a lot of birthday shout outs that I want to make, and I'm going to make them as the month goes on. But for my classmates of 1992 Kamasa Secondary School, just who turned 50 in the month of July, happy Golden Jubilee to every one of you. I wish all of you nothing but the very best. You're halfway through life. Wow. Congratulations on making it through. So, like I said, we've been talking about, breaking the pattern, and for those of you who were not around, the last time we spoke, we talked about, how to break unhealthy patterns. And I'm just going to run quickly through them, and then we'll give final thoughts. And like I told you, as we stare into the month of July and probably into the month of August, we're going to be looking at it from different angles, different unhealthy patterns from different angles. And then we're going to try to run through them just so that you and I could understand what we're talking about from different perspective. Because it's one thing to talk from a general platform, then when we have specific unhealthy patterns that are supposed to be broken, we'll be able to deal with some of those unhealthy patterns. So some of the unhealthy patterns we talked about awareness, and we talked about people being aware of their unhealthy pattern, because most people are living in denial. You don't want to accept the fact that you are going through or you are dealing with an unhealthy pattern. And the first step to breaking it is identifying that this pattern is unhealthy and needs to be broken. So unhealthy patterns, number 1, we talked about awareness. Number 2, we talked about understanding triggers. And what does that mean? Understanding the things that actually trigger these unhealthy patterns in your life. What are those things? And I gave an example with myself, for back then when there was the issue of the whole rape scandal and all that, I fell back on, cigarette smoking. And like I told you, that every time that thought came about, or every time there was that anger or that pain, that was one of the ways that I found solace, right? So, and it took time, but there was a breaking of it when I understood that pattern was unhealthy for me. So for a lot of us, understanding those things that trigger us. What are those things that trigger us? I told you again that I had anger issues. There are things and people or situations or circumstances around your life that trigger those patterns. If it's the company you keep, if it's the kind of thoughts you have, if it's places you go, or things that you find yourself engaging in that are causing these unhealthy patterns, then the first thing is to understand that these things are responsible for, enhancing those triggers of those unhealthy patterns and breaking away from them. If it's people, cutting away from it. If it's a relationship that has lingered too long and has kept you in a place of toxicity, cut it off. If it's, just whatever it is, understand what it is. When you have identified what it is, understand that this thing needs to be done away with, and then cut away with it. cut off from it. And we said, just understanding it, and then keeping track of these patterns, what happens every time these things occur. What are the situations that always occur when these patterns happen? And that's how you understand that these are the things that are responsible for those triggers, and cut them off. Number 3, we talked about setting boundaries. And like I told you in the last broadcast that I had, that most people, I think the greatest issue we have is, setting boundaries for ourselves. We don't know when to draw the line. We don't know when to cross that border of, unhealthy and healthy. And we tend to want to continue in these places. We want to continue those set of friends. We want to continue going to those kind of places. And every time we find ourselves in those places, these things cause us to fall back on these patterns. So when you set boundaries, like I tell you always, people will only address you how you choose to address yourself. People will only respect you as far as you respect yourself. Now, if you set boundaries and you show people that you respect these boundaries that you have set for yourself, people will begin to respect those boundaries for you as well, and will not want to cross the line. But as long as you disrespect your own boundaries, then what you're telling other people is that you do not deserve them respecting those boundaries, because you yourself don't see the value of your boundaries at all. And number 4, we talked about dealing with developing healthy alternatives to these unhealthy patterns. What are the alternatives to these unhealthy patterns that you have set for yourself? Like I said in the last broadcast, when you can find a positive replacement for these unhealthy patterns with something positive. For instance, if you're a smoker and you tell yourself for every time you feel this, rather than smoking, you would take yourself a cold glass of water, or take a walk. Or if you're an alcoholic, rather than taking alcohol, I am going to replace it by doing this. If I am a gossiper, I am a liar, I am a backbiter, I am a cheat, or whatever it is, or even if it's cheating in an unhealthy diet. Remember, I told you, I said it's not just unhealthy behaviors. There are things that we know that we shouldn't do, even with our bodies, that are healthy at the age that we're in, or maybe recommendation by a doctor. And when you find an alternative, for me, I know I'm a very, very strong sweet tooth. So, but of late, I have learned rather to replace, my love for sugar with a lot of fruits, and it's been very, very helpful for me, because now I find myself eating healthier, right? So rather than eating the junk, I replace it with vegetables. I eat a lot of salads, like I told you. So these are ways. Find healthy alternatives to these patterns, and it will help you. Then finally, I talked about seeking help. Seeking professional help, seeking help from a friend, seeking help from a good friend, seeking help from parents, seeking from your spiritual leader, whoever it is. But oftentimes, most times, when you find yourself being accountable over a particular behavior or a particular unhealthy pattern, it helps to put you in check, because now you have someone other than yourself watching over you to make sure you do not fall back into that character, into that behavior, into that pattern, going to that place, or indulging in that thing. So finding someone that you could, talk to, who would be of good help to you, is very, very key. No man is an island, and every man needs help, no matter how bad it gets. And, I always tell people, some people feel ashamed to come out and say, okay, this is what I am struggling with. But as long as you are, indulging with it in the secret, it could be of a very, very big problem to you. But the easiest way to do it is when someone else knows and you are accountable to that person. It makes it so easy to deal with. It makes it so easy to get rid of. And before I continue, I'd like to stop and say a very big shout out. Thank you, Femi Akimpele Dawson, my national president, Kamal Secondary School. I appreciate you for always being a very strong support. Thank you, my big brother, Netineno. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure having you here. God bless you. And for every one of you who are stopping by, I see you. Thank you, Olushi. Olajide, thank you also. I see you, and I appreciate you also for joining me. Now, what are those things that you know would probably be a hindrance to you trying to break an unhealthy pattern? Because we've talked about how to break those patterns, but there are certain things that people go through, and it makes it kind of difficult for you to break free from that pattern. Perhaps maybe it is where you find yourself at the moment. Either maybe a residence, you are under parental control and living under your parents' influence, and you're probably watching them indulge, and that is where you get your training from, and you're trying to break free from this, but these are things you're seeing on a daily basis, and it's kind of difficult to stop because it's right in your face, right? And then maybe you're one of those. For instance, I was talking about children not being heard, or children who are struggling with this idea of, I just want people to know this is what I'm going through. These are my struggles as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult, but then nobody is listening, and you are at home, you really need that voice. Now, I would advise strongly that sometimes I always tell people, people don't know that they're doing you wrong until you come out and tell them that this is what you're doing that is actually hurting me. So sometimes also confronting that very issue that is staring at you as a threat into your face. For instance, I'll give you a story. When I was growing up, I told you I had a military father, and for some reason, at some point, there was this strictness and this excessive discipline, and I remember when we were growing up, at some point, everybody became afraid to actually go talk to him and say this. And I told him, we really need to talk to him, because if we don't talk to him, he probably doesn't even know that what he's doing is actually getting to us, if you understand what I mean. And I remember that moment I sat with my dad of blessed memory, and I told him, I was like, this and this and this is how I feel when you do this, this and this. It's not really helped me, because over the years, this is what I struggle with because of this, this and this. And every time you are afraid to speak up to your parents, or you are rather afraid rather than respect, it kind of makes it difficult for you in the real world, because now you've learned the spirit of fear. So when it's time to confront someone or to confront a situation, you are often afraid to take those decisions, because that is an unhealthy pattern of fear to take decisions that are very, very, very important in your life, because of the spirit of fear and that timidity, and because it was something that was learned over the years. And I explained it to him, and I remember him saying something that got really it was like a real key of deliverance for me, because it kind of changed the way I viewed a lot of things. And he said to me, every time I was very, very hard on you, and every time you thought I was not really proud of you because you said something or you had a win, and all I said was you tried. What I was trying to tell you is, don't be too comfortable in this win, because if you get too comfortable in this win, you will not want to push yourself further to be able to attack greater challenges up ahead. And so he said, so I do that so that you could look within and try harder. Now, it didn't look that way for me as a child growing up, because I just felt he wasn't proud enough of my achievements as of everything I did, and I was pushing myself to do certain things beyond my expectations, but the more I felt as if he wasn't, the more I wanted to try to do, because I needed that validation from my dad as a young child growing up. But when I understood why he responded in certain manners, it changed my perspective about how I viewed myself, and it change my perspective about certain patterns that I had built over the years about myself. And I decided to tell myself that, you know what, you've been doing good. All he wants you to do is don't ever see your last win as your final bus stop. There are greater wins up ahead. And sometimes confronting that hindrance or that obstacle that stands between you and breaking that pattern, it's ultimately the best. And sometimes, taking drastic decisions, I when I mean confronting, for instance, I like using myself, when I'm talking, because sometimes when you use other people's stories, you may offend them or other, but I use mine because I know it's my story and I can't get offended, and it's already out there, so it's not something that you could just go out and use it. If you do so, that's your prerogative and not mine, because I've moved past that. But I remember when I was dealing with the issue of smoking, and I needed to break that unhealthy cycle because of certain things that were about to happen in my life, and I needed to make that drastic transformation in my life, because I knew that habit was going to be a roadblock to my future. It was going to be a roadblock to my destiny, my purpose, my assignment, and ultimately my health, right? So I knew that all around me were people who were doing it, right? So one of those days, it was a drastic decision. I had to look at it and just tell myself, you know what? I'm confronting you. You may be all around me right now, but I have made up my mind. I'm stopping, and I'm stopping. And that's that. So continuing. And the more I continued, the more the urge for it left. The more I continued looking at it as an obstacle, the more I was able to push that aside. So you might want to confront that pattern headlong. Sometimes when you tell yourself, okay, I know it's a bad pattern, but when I done with this phase of my life, I will stop. You will procrastinate, and procrastination itself is a bad pattern. And trust me, I was the queen of procrastination before, but I now discovered that, the second waits for no man. Take that decision now. Take that decision today. Make up your mind to confront that pattern and tell yourself that, I need to just stop. I need to just stop. Now we're going to be confronting and talking about the unhealthy pattern of lust of the flesh. And by lust of the flesh, sexual urges, sexual unhealthy patterns. And that's I'm going to start with that, and then we're going to progress to other unhealthy patterns, because most people find out that they view sex like it's a pure sin. Now, like I said when we talked about let's talk about sex, sex is a beautiful thing when it is not abused, because sex ultimately is designed for marital couples. However, in this generation, it's out there. It's like your daily, in Nigeria, your daily pure water. Anywhere you go, you find it. However, now I want to talk about the unhealthiness of it. And you might want to agree or disagree with me, but sex is not something that should be out there rampantly on the streets. I see a lot of things that are happening, and because people have now commercialized it, it's out there on social media. There are porn sites now that sell it out. Aside from porn sites now, we have people, like I said, advertising bodies on social media. These patterns have their long-term consequences. Now, those consequences are what we're going to look at, and then we're going to try to get people who have been able to mature in that topic to come and tell you how you can break out of it. But I want to start off the topic by telling you that sex itself is not a sin, but like I told you, God designed it for a purpose. And if you want to know more about that, you could go back to our earlier videos when we had Let's Talk About Sex, and Let's Talk About Sex explained what sex was intended for by God. Now, what we see now is the abuse of sex. And now it has become, rather than a healthy thing, it has become an unhealthy pattern. And somebody says, well, I'm in a relationship with one person, we've been dating for years, we have sex, we don't abuse, so it's not abuse. Technically, we're even thinking about getting married. Now, here is what sex does. Like I told people when we had Let's Talk About Sex, it introduces insecurity once it is done out of wedlock. Somebody said, I don't agree with you. Well, if you were dating someone and you met that person and you start engaging in sexual activities, all of a sudden, when you are no longer in touch with that person, say the person travels or the person is somewhere else, you're worried about what that person is up to, especially if you are also doing it somewhere else by the side. Now, one of the things that sex does in the place of insecurity, like I said, is you begin to worry. This thing that I have done with this person, if this person is not with me, does that person indulge in it? And like I told you, if you're not one that knows how to control it, it consumes you and it becomes, insecurity. And insecurity breeds so many other unhealthy things that come along with it. So we're going to continue on the depth of, the unhealthy pattern of premarital sex, because if I call it sex, somebody would say it's not an unhealthy pattern. So we're going to talk about the unhealthy pattern of premarital sex, because that is where there is an issue. The more you get into it, the more problems it's bringing for us. And we have many youths right now who are going through so many things that they didn't bargain for, only because they allowed themselves get roped into this particular pattern. Now, I want to put my final thoughts first and foremost together for breaking the pattern before we come back on Wednesday to talk about lust, the unhealthy pattern of lust and premarital sex. Now, like I said, everyone has patterns. That's one thing we all have to understand. Some are healthy, some are very unhealthy. Now, how to know which one is which is when you see the outcome that comes as a consequence of those patterns. Finally, I want you to also understand that recognizing and addressing unhealthy patterns, like I said last week, is not a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it's a form of strength. Whenever you identify something that is not right in you and you conquer it. I was sharing with someone and I said, look, whenever people talk to you about an unhealthy behavior or an unhealthy character, an unhealthy attitude, rather than feeling as if you're being attacked and begin to fight and get upset about it, look at it critically and address it, especially when it's coming from too many people. Because remember, one of the ways we said you can identify an unhealthy pattern is when you are told by others. Now, if one person tells you, you may say the person's opinion, but when too many people are telling you about the same thing, my brother, my sister, it is time for you to do a self-check and tell yourself the truth and address. So I want us to look within. What are those things that we really need to address in our lives? Do not look at it as a weakness. Do not look at it as an abuse. Do not look at it as something that is a flaw. It's not a flaw if you can correct it in time before it becomes a flaw in your life. So everybody has patterns. Now, when you identify that it's unhealthy, like I said, take a conscious decision and tell yourself it has to go. Address it. Put an end to it. That is a sign of great strength. Change is possible with perseverance, with self-compassion, and the right support. Like I said, believing in yourself, believing that you can make that change in your life, believing that you have what it takes on the inside of you to change that unhealthiness into something wholesome, into something beautiful about yourself, is a very, very strong character. And having the right people to stand by you when you go through it, matters a lot. So I'm going to stop here this week. And I want to congratulate those of you who are already taking conscious decisions to break unhealthy patterns. I'm on that verge right now. There's an unhealthy pattern I'm dealing with. And trust me, I am putting it to practice and it's working for me because I am feeling lighter. I am feeling better with myself because now I know that, yes, I have what it takes to actually break it, right? Now, like I said, when we come on Wednesday, we're going to deal with the unhealthy pattern of premarital sex and lust itself. And I pray to God that you would grant me audience on that day. 30 minutes, 5:30 to 6 is my time with you. By the way, if you have not liked or subscribed to my YouTube channel, please rush over there, subscribe to my YouTube channel, like, share, comment, and let's take this messages global so that people can break out of these cycles of unhealthiness and move into a better life. Like we say, exhale is all about letting go of the bad atmosphere and taking in and breathing in a whole new atmosphere. So till I see you again Wednesday by 5:30 right here on this page, join me again on Exhale Online with Pravi. Have a wonderful week ahead. Much love and God bless you.